Take your Bibles and open up with me to Proverbs 30 this morning. We're taking a few of the Proverbs each week during the summer and gaining wisdom for daily living. That's kind of what we've entitled this. And this morning we're going to look at two Proverbs in particular about truthfulness and deceit, or you might want to say lying and faithfulness or lying and integrity. And I'm going to walk you through those in a second, but I just want to challenge your thinking for a moment that often when we think of something like a truth teller or someone who struggles with lying or deceiving, we tend to think we just have to stop, right? Like we just got to stop lying. And I want to unpack that with you a little bit more deeply this morning, that there may be something working beneath the surface in each of our lives whenever we're prone to not tell the truth or to withhold truth. And so we're going to kind of unpack that this morning. So we're going to look at two Proverbs. I'm going to give them to you first. Proverbs 30, verse 7, if you have your text there. You may want to jump down there. The text says, "Two things I ask of you, deny them not to me before I die. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful for me, lest I be full and deny you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of God." That's the first proverb. That's about lying. Here's the second one. This is about truth-telling. There we read in Proverbs 3. You don't have to turn there. We'll get over there in a second. "Let not steadfast love," or you can translate that mercy, "and faithfulness," you can translate that word truth, "forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man." Okay? So I want to teach you two things about truth. We're going to talk about truth's enemy, and we're going to talk about what I'm going to call we're going to talk about what I'm going to call truth's counterbalance. So again, that's not meant as a compromising word. It's meant as something that the word uses to describe how we tell the truth. And we're going to find that in both of these passages. So let's start with Proverbs 30, verse 7. And here's the statement that goes along with it. "Truth's enemy is pride. Therefore, the best path to living truthfully is walking humbly." Okay? Just read that with me. Say it with me, okay? "Truth's enemy is pride. Therefore, the best path to living truthfully is walking humbly." Now, one of the cool things about the Proverbs is that when you read them, they almost seem like they change subject like as rapid as a dictionary, you know, like it's just one proverb and then the next. But often these Proverbs are uniquely tied together. And you find one of those ties here, okay? In Proverbs verse 30, verse 7, we read, "Two things I ask of you," and here they are, "that you may remove falsehood and lying from me, and that I may not have poverty nor riches." Now, those things do not seem to be connected, right? When you first read them, you think they're completely two different things. But the writer, the writer of this wisdom literature is actually saying, listen, these two things are uniquely connected. And he's going to unpack poverty and riches in just a second, but I want you to see that we tie falsehood and lying and poverty and riches together because the first one talks about integrity and truthfulness, but the second one gears us right towards the issue of pridefulness. In fact, I'll show you that in the text. You ready? Here we go. Let me give you three elements about humility. Humility is alert, humility is averse, humility is aware, okay? So we find these in our text. Here's the first one. Humility is alert to self-confidence. Humility is alert to self-confidence. And I don't mean self-confidence in the positive way, but in the negative way. Humility is alert to self-confidence, that if we're confident in ourselves, we do not see our need to be confident in the Lord, and therefore, this is not the kind of self-confidence we want. It's a prideful kind of self-confidence. By the way, we find this idea throughout the scriptures that remember when David battles Goliath, he says to Goliath, who's significantly taller, significantly bigger, and has fought more battles than David has, he says, "You come to me with the power of the sword, but I come to you in the name of the Lord," right? He doesn't say, "But hey, I was pretty good in 8th grade when I was throwing the sling around." Okay. He doesn't take any credit. He focuses it on the Lord, right? In fact, we find that as well. When Gideon attacks, he says, listen, the sword of the Lord and Gideon. He gets it first for the Lord and then adds himself. There isn't a, hey, we can handle this, right? Humility is alert to self-confidence and where that is. Now watch this in the text, because this is we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive here into how we kind of think, but we don't realize we think this way. Notice what it says. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Now watch what happens next. Feed me with the food that is needful for me. By the way, just what I need, not anything more. Okay? Lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? What the writer is saying is he's saying, listen, if God gives me too much, I'll start to think it's all about me. And again, it's not hard to picture this, is it? When we have just enough, our needs met, it's easy for us to think that God met our needs. But once we've met our needs and get over into the want category, the things we desire, right about then, it's easy for us to think, hey, I deserve this. I think I should buy this. I think I should get this. We move past our needs too quickly. Again, the scriptures do this so well. You know the Lord's Prayer, right? Give us this day our what? Yeah. What if you were living day to day for your daily needs? You say, well, that's kind of what my paycheck feels like. Hold on. You probably have some kind of leftovers in your refrigerator. In fact, if you're like most of us, you've had some leftovers in there that have been there so long, they've started to grow additional leftovers for you, right? We don't think in terms of our daily needs. And therefore, we get real quickly over to our wants. And what I want you to see today is that kind of self-confidence that begins to say, it's not about what God provided, it's just about what I want. Now, let me unpack that for you. And probably the best passage ever to do that from. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 16, we read, for all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life is not from the Father, but from the world. Here it comes. And the world is passing away along with its desires. But whoever does the will of God abides forever. You find three dynamics that show you that your desires, what you want now, is about you thinking you can get it, not necessarily that God wants it. See how it closes, verse 17. It's about the will of God, not about your desires. Let me just unpack those three phrases: the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eye, the pride of life. I think all temptation comes in these three categories, but I'm going to give it to you slightly different. Look at this. The desires of the flesh, that's what feels good. If it feels good, I want it. The desires of the eyes, that's what looks good. If it looks good, I want it. The pride of life, that's what makes me look good. And I can almost promise you that any level of deception you've had has probably worked in one of these three categories. Just think about it for a second. Why do you reveal certain things about yourself when you talk to somebody else whom you've never even met before, but you keep certain things a secret and you're not about to let those things out of the bag? The reason is because certain things, conversations, make you look good and other conversations make you not look so good. Even it's possible for us to feign a humility, right? Years ago, I may have shared with you the story. Kim and I love to sing, and we were singing in college in a congregation kind of situation. And afterwards, after the song was over, the woman turned around in front of us and she said, well, I thought I heard angels singing behind me, right? And I turned around and looked behind me and said, it must have been the people behind me, right? And she looked right at me and said, mock humility makes me want to vomit. Wow, okay? I'm just telling you, like I was sucking in air and I didn't even know what to say. I couldn't say anything, right? Here's the thing. Sometimes we even want to look humble, right? We want to look like we're humble because that makes us look good. And man, that woman just called me out, right? And I just want to remind you, we say and do all sorts of things to make us look good. And you do too. By the way, it's not hard to see how deceit starts to roll into that. But I'll come back to that in a second, okay? Here's the second idea. Humility is averse to self-pity. Humility is alert to self-confidence. It's saying, whoa, I want my confidence in the Lord, not in myself. But by the way, just let me help you change your language here. If you're one of those people who says, yeah, but I like to encourage people. Okay, I get it. So you say, you can do this, you got this, you can do this, you got this, all right? Can you remind them at somewhere in there that they do it in the strength of the Lord, not by their own strength, right? Can you just pause and remind them that it's not about them? It's about the Lord working through them. You say, well, yeah, but they don't believe the Lord. Hey, listen, they're breathing because God gave them breath. It's not hard for us to remind people that every breath we take, every beat that our heart makes is about the fact that the Lord enabled us to live and move and have our being. Humility is averse to self-pity. Let me show you that in the latter part of the verse. Proverbs 30, verse 9, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane the name of my God. Now, for just a moment, it's not just about the stealing, okay? It's about the desire to want to have and not waiting on the Lord and therefore reaching out ahead of God's plan and taking. This is the person who is engaged with feeling sorry for themselves. I don't have something, so I'm going to take something that isn't mine. It's the same picture. We don't think of it because it almost sounds like humility. Who could be more humble than the person who doesn't have anything? But the person who doesn't have anything still has a heart that desires and wants to have things, and so they take things. And so the writer of Proverbs says, listen, in my pride, because I want to overcome deceit. I want lying to be put away from me. Listen, Lord, help me walk in humility. I don't want to be self-confident. I got it covered. I don't need God. I have everything I need and everything I want. I don't want to be engaged in self-pity, feeling sorry for myself because I don't have what I want. Both are important. And here's the final one. Look at it. Humility is aware of self-deception. Humility is aware of self-deception. I'm going to take you back, if I could, to two words in the text in verse 8. Just take a look at this real quickly. Remove far from me falsehood and lying. Before he talks about give me neither poverty nor riches, he says, remove from me falsehood and lying. Now, the word falsehood here is used it's translated, over half the time, it's translated as vain and empty. That is, it was something that I thought I was getting, but it didn't provide me what I thought I was getting. In other words, I wanted something, and so I went for what I wanted, and then I got there and said, it's vain and empty. It's not really what I thought it was. It's a little bit like, you ever see around Easter time, like one of those 3-foot chocolate bunnies, right? And you think, man, I bet that thing weighs 75 pounds. And then you pick it up, and it doesn't weigh anything because it's what? There you go, you got it. It's hollow in the center. This is what every desire you and I have ever wanted actually is. It promises something that we'll be happy if we have it, but then when we actually get it, it's like a lead ball around a chain to our legs. It drags us down. It doesn't promise us what we wanted. Instead, it chains us to a certain behavior. It promises one thing, but it's not. But the word lying is actually a combination of two Hebrew words. It's the word for deceit, but it's tied to the word for words. So it's deceitful words. And notice how these two work together. Because I believed or was self-deceived, I saw something I wanted, but it was empty. I was willing to lie with my words to get what I wanted, even though I was deceived. In fact, it's fascinating. My study this week, I realized that even atheists buy this. Did you know that? Back in 1976, when Richard Dawkins, you may recognize his name as a pretty big-time atheist, a published atheist. In one of the books he wrote, he had Robert Trives write the foreword to that book, and Trives actually said, we deceive ourselves to deceive others. Now, he was making the case that it was all biological, right? That you just had this desire to accelerate because that's part of the evolutionary process, I guess. And so you would deceive yourself first to deceive others. And I thought to myself, man, that is like right out of the scriptures. Why don't you guys just acknowledge you got that from the scriptures? Okay. Falsehood, I deceive myself, and then I use those deceitful words to deceive others. By the way, this is why the person who is lying to others has become very convincing at first lying to themselves. By the way, it's not a surprise that a chronic liar, maybe you've heard this before, can actually beat the polygraph test. You know that, right? That they can actually lie on the polygraph test and beat it. Why? Because they are so convinced they've first lied to themselves over and over and over again, so they can't even find truth anymore. And it doesn't even affect them physiologically because they're so used to lying to themselves. I love the way that Proverbs 14:8 counters this. The wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way. Discern is a great word. It's the word that's used of Joseph when Pharaoh says to him, "Is there someone as wise and discerning as this man? I'm going to put him in charge of half the kingdom." Okay. It's the word that's used of King Solomon, who, when he prayed, said, "Lord, I would rather have wisdom to discern good and evil." Right. Notice that this is a word that says, I want to first be on guard that I am not self-deceived. By the way, where did Joseph get discernment? He got it from the Lord. But if you back up in the biblical text, you'll see that he was exercising the difference between good and evil when Potiphar's wife tempted him, and he left everything he had and ran right out of the room. Why? Because he was not self-deceived. He did not stand there and say, I got this, okay? He said, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to fall. And he ran. He discerned the difference between good and evil. It's a great reminder, isn't it, that it is possible for us to be self-deceived. And I want you to think about this for a moment, because we see it over in Proverbs chapter 12 as well. Deceit is in the heart for those who devise evil, but those who plan peace have joy. No ill befalls the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. Notice the first part of this. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. What I want you to realize today is it's not enough to say, okay, I struggle sometimes with telling the truth, Phil. I'm just going to stop, okay? I want you to see that you're never going to stop until you figure out the desires that cause you to say, listen, this feels good, or this looks good, or this makes me look good, and how those desires work to cause you to be deceitful. By the way, it's not hard at all to see this. I mentioned it. We come back to it for a moment. Adam and Eve sinned in the garden. One of the first impacts of a fallen world, of human beings who sinned and now no longer were perfect in their morality, but had this fallen nature. One of the first impacts was that they were going to hide, okay? That's deceit. Why? Because God comes looking for them in the garden, and lo and behold, they're not there, right? It's almost like, where did they go, right? They're always here, but they are there. They're just what? Hiding behind the tree, right? This also is why, and you can see it so clearly in children. If you can remember back, like Kim and I almost have to remember now as grandparents, but if I can remember back to my kids doing something that was wrong, okay, like we asked them not to take something or eat something, and then you'd find the wrapper, but the wrapper wasn't laying in the middle of the coffee table, okay? It was tucked behind the couch, okay? Who taught them to put that there? Okay. Their mother, right? Right? No, she's the honest one. It was probably the dad was sneaking the cookies when nobody was watching, right? There is in us the ability to want something and realize it's wrong and immediately deceive. Okay. By the way, here's what happens. It's pretty easy to see, right? You take a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, you say, no, you can't eat that, but they eat it, and they leave crumbs kind of scattered. But by the time they get up to junior high, they're smart enough to say, hey, I'll eat that, clean up the crumbs, okay? Nobody can see what I did. See? Is it any wonder that they grow up to be adults? All of us struggle with this. And when we do something wrong, we immediately hide. And I'm telling you, it doesn't matter whether you're a believer or not. You can see this everywhere, right? You can see this everywhere. Why is it that when a person runs a red light or does something, they immediately look around, okay? They immediately are trying to find an escape path, okay? Why? Because deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. So you're going to have to wrestle with your desires. Now note this. We, again, come back to it again. Here it is. Truth's enemy is pride. It's not deceit, okay? It's pride working beneath the surface that keeps stirring that up. Therefore, the best path to living truthfully is walking humbly. Stop hiding. Start telling the truth. Start engaging with others transparently, with authenticity. Show integrity. Humility is to alert self-confidence. I can't do this on my own. It's averse to self-pity. I'm not engaging and feeling sorry for myself. And it's aware of self-deception. I know I can be deceived. Remember, I started with King David, with Goliath. That's pretty clear, isn't it? He looks at Goliath and he says, you come to me with your sword and spear, but I come to you in the name of the Lord. Okay. But when he faces the temptation with Bathsheba, he is totally self-deceived. He stands on the roof of his house, he looks, and he looks back, and he assumes he can handle the temptation. Total self-deception. And that is why he falls to the temptation. Okay, that's truth's enemy. Let me take you to this other verse in Proverbs chapter 3. If you have your Bibles there, you might want to jump over there. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. We've talked about the lies and the deceit. I want to talk with you about the truthfulness, or what is translated here, rendered as faithfulness. In Proverbs chapter 3, we read, let not steadfast love and mercy, in the New King James renders it mercy and truth, and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Now, for just a moment, let's just talk about that, okay? Notice that there is a writing of mercy and truth on your heart. But look back over at this verse. Remember this verse real quickly? Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. So by nature, we have deceit in our hearts. We're trying to think of a plan or a means of deceiving people. But here's what I want you to see, that what we want on our hearts is we want mercy and truth. Now, let me just unpack both of those words for you for a second, okay? Let me talk with you about what I'm going to call truth. The word translated in the ESV there is faith or faithful or faithfully. You can see a quarter of the time it's translated truth or truthfulness. It's the Hebrew word emet. It's also translated true, security, truly, trustworthy, what is true, what is assured. What I want you to see is that the reason they use this word is it's truth lived out practically, okay? There is integrity in one's life here. They're not hiding. They're not covering up. We all have the tendency to do it, okay? Some of us more than others, myself included. But we want to make sure that we're practically demonstrating and living out faithfulness or truthfulness. Now, by the way, this doesn't mean that a person will never lie, okay? But it does mean that they're not characterized by that. Like, they're not characterized by always not telling the truth. So let me just talk about what I'm going to call truth's counterweight. Truth's counterweight is mercy. Therefore, how we speak what is true matters. Okay, truth's enemy was pride. But truth's counterweight is mercy. Therefore, how we speak what is true matters. Now, I'm going to call it a counterweight because I want you to see that they're both needed. In fact, if you look at the text again, here it is. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. It puts them both together. It doesn't elevate one over the other, okay? It puts them both together. And I'm going to call mercy the counterweight. In fact, let me show you what a counterweight looks like. If you've ever seen one of those big cranes, okay, you'll notice that there is on the back of that crane a counterweight, okay? And when that counterweight does not match what's going on the other side of the crane, okay, that's like a really bad YouTube video happening right there, okay? The whole crane is just going to collapse. It's going to go right on over. But what I want you to see is that there is, in that counterweight between truth and mercy for us, not so much for Jesus, who was full of grace and truth. We'll see that in a second. But for us, there's always going to be a tension there, right? This is the truth. This is mercy. This is the truth. This is mercy. They're both needed, okay? You say, well, mercy would look the other way. No, mercy wouldn't look the other way. Mercy would talk to the person the right way as they told them the truth, okay? But if it's just truth, maybe you've even said that before. Well, at least I tell the truth, okay, as I smash you to smithereens, right? That's not it either. You have a crane that's toppling over if you tell the truth without enacting mercy or grace. In fact, we're going to look back at that verse in Proverbs, but let's just unpack it. Here we go. Truth's counterweight is mercy. Therefore, how we speak what is true matters. Grace and truth is how we best glorify God. Notice I didn't say grace or truth. Notice I didn't say grace but truth. I said grace and truth. It's a counterweight. Mercy and truth is the counterweight. It's how we're most effective. In fact, let me show you that in this text in Proverbs chapter 3. Let not steadfast love, that is mercy, and faithfulness, that is truth, forsake you. Verse 4, so you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. You find success, you glorify God when you do both of these. It's pretty simple in the text. Grace and truth is how we best glorify God. Not only that, note this. Grace and truth is how we best help others. Grace and truth is how we best help others. Look again at this verse, Proverbs chapter 3, verse 4. Steadfast love and truth forsake you. Let them not forsake you. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God. And finish it for me. Man, that's right. This is the best way to help somebody else, is that you would bring truth, but you would bring it with grace, not one or the other. For those who tend to be maybe on the more empathetic side or the gracious side, you might have a tendency, or we might have a tendency, not to speak the truth. But for those of you who only see truth, you might have a tendency to not speak it in a way that brings grace and mercy. Both are necessary, and there's a tension there. By the way, let me ask you a question. How many of you, if I were to say, okay, if it comes to the grace side or the truth side, you know which side you kind of land on? Can I see your hands? Okay, for those who aren't raising hands, the person next to you, how many of you know which side they land on? Okay, there's a good chance you know, right? Even if the other person doesn't know. And here's what I want you to see. In almost all of our relationships, God brings us people who aren't exactly like us so that that counterweight balancing starts to work. Hey, if you grew up in a home where it was just all about black and white truth and there was no grace in it, there's a chance you might have grown discouraged. If you grew up in a home where there was just, I'm going to look the other way, I'm not going to worry about it, don't worry, everything's okay. I know you just robbed the convenience store, but everything's okay. If that was your approach in growing up, okay, there's a good chance you're going to do some jail time. Right? Both are essential. That's what I want you to see. Steadfast love, mercy, and faithfulness, truth. The word steadfast love, by the way, translated mercy, sometimes translated grace. Your King James translates it as the word loving kindness. It's the Hebrew word hesed. It is probably my favorite Old Testament word because it is most often used not of us, finish it for me, but of God. His steadfast love endures forever. When Joseph was in prison because he was falsely accused, God showed him his steadfast love. It's a beautiful word. It's a word that describes God over and over again. And yet God also is holiness in a way that the law cannot be violated without a consequence. He is both of those in the Old Testament. He's both of those in the New Testament. And he does them perfectly. Let me finish this for you real quickly on how it is most effectively ministering to others. Look at Ephesians chapter 4, verse 15. Rather, speaking the truth in love. There it is. Truth and love, okay? Truth and grace, truth and mercy. Both are essential. We are to grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. When each part is working properly, remember the tension between some who are more truth-based and some who are more grace-based, whatever they might be. When each part is working properly, it makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Wow. You can't say, just push pause here. You can't say, well, I don't say anything to that person because I just love them the way they are, okay? The truth is engaged in verse 15 so that the body may build itself up in love, verse 16. Here's the final one. Truth's counterweight is mercy. Therefore, how we speak, what is true, matters. Grace and truth is how we best glorify God. Grace and truth is how we best help others. Here's my favorite. Grace and truth is how we are most like Jesus. Grace and truth is how we are most like Jesus. If there's one thing from the opening pages of John's gospel that you would understand, is that Jesus just wasn't 50-50 or 70-30 or 80-20. Just like we would say Jesus is 100% God and 100% man, He was both, not partially one or the other, but theologically, to get it accurate, we would say he is 100% both, okay? We would also say he is 100% grace and 100% truth, because notice how it says it. And the Word became flesh and dwelled among us, and we have seen his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Wow. He wasn't just 80% grace and 20% truth. He was full of grace and truth. While you and I have these proportions imperfectly, Jesus had them fully and perfectly, which is how you get to the gospel, isn't it? That Jesus understood that a penalty had to be paid for God, the violation of God's law had to be paid, okay? God couldn't look the other way. But in his love and grace, he gave himself for us. By the way, the same idea is used back in Proverbs. Look at Proverbs 16:6. By steadfast love, there's your word mercy, and faithfulness, there's your word truth. Iniquity is atoned for. Atoned for. In other words, God is even back in the Old Testament saying, here is the gospel. I am telling you it is about both grace and truth. I do not look the other way, but I will bring the just penalty on my Son so that you may receive my grace and mercy and therefore be set right in a relationship with me. Such a great reminder. Maybe this morning it's a reminder for what you need. Maybe you came to church this morning and you're thinking, well, you know, church isn't for me. It's for everybody who's got it all together, okay? I'm just telling you right now, it's not for everybody who's got it all together. Well, that might be somebody else's church. That isn't this church, right? There are around you people who have struggled, people who have failed, people who are still on the journey, right? But they also understand that because God reached into their heart through Christ and saved them, he created within them new desires. And those new desires upon their salvation enable them to make every effort to do the right thing. Why? Because of the work God did through Christ in their heart first.